This is an iMac, and specifically it's an M1 iMac, and not the new version with the M3 chip. Not that you would have known if I didn't tell you, because Apple hasn't really changed much about this version of the iMac. Some folks were expecting a larger 27-inch or perhaps even 32-inch version, maybe with the M3 Pro chip. But it seems that Apple has put an end to those rumours in an interview they did with The Verge. So if you want an iMac, it's the 24-inch version or nothing. Apple never made an iMac with the M2 chip, so we've got this jump from M1 to M3, which represents a significant performance upgrade to the iMac. And perhaps it means that there'll be options to buy the previous M1 model at a discount, and that there'll be a wider choice available in the used market. And that does lead us to a question. This M1 iMac is about 2.5 years old at time of recording, so does it make sense to buy an older iMac in 2023 or 2024? There is a quick answer to that question, and it's yes, because the M1 iMac is still a great machine, but you do need to buy at the right price, and it might not be appropriate to all users. But to explore this, we need to look at the differences between the performance of the M1 and M3 chips, talk about what makes an iMac, and look at which spec you should buy. So let's start with some simple benchmark comparisons in the Geekbench 6 CPU test. The M1 has a single core score of 2,336, whereas the M3 scores 3,100, an increase of about 32.7%. That's impressive. When it comes to the multi-core score, the gap widens. M1 has 8,322 points, but M3 pushes on to 11,775, and that's an increase of 41.5%. Even more impressive. So it does seem that the M3 iMac is a substantial upgrade over the M1 iMac, but there are some caveats to that. Firstly, we need to remember that this is one benchmark. It's a set of tests that are designed to represent a typical workflow, but not necessarily a test designed to represent your workflow. So you can't conclude that everything you do will be 30 to 40% faster, because other things will have a bearing on that. SSD performance, the amount of memory you've got, and indeed your own performance. M3 isn't going to make you type any faster. We do also need to look at these numbers in perspective. For example, apps and browser tabs open incredibly quickly on M1. So even if an M3 machine can do it 30 to 40% faster, it may not actually make a meaningful difference to you. It's a bit like saying one hypercar is faster than another hypercar. Now don't get me wrong here, if you put an M3 iMac side by side with the M1 version, it will be noticeably quicker. But it's noticeably quicker than something that is already very quick, and we don't tend to use machines side by side. The simple truth is that even now, an M1 iMac feels very snappy and performant. There is an area though where the difference between the chips is very noticeable, and that is graphics performance. Again, let's use the numbers from the Geekbench 6 benchmark, specifically the Metal Compute test. Here, the average M1 scores 30,406, but M3 is hitting 47,057, and that's an improvement of 54.8%. This probably doesn't paint the complete picture of those performance upgrades though, because the M3 uses Apple's new GPU architecture, and it introduces support for hardware ray tracing and mesh shaders. M3 also offers a better media engine. That's the video encoders and decoders built into the chip. So those, along with its improved GPU, would make the M3 iMac a more capable video editing machine. Now, it's not going to keep up with the likes of the M3 Pro and Max chips in that area, but for standard 4K editing with consumer video codecs, it'll be great, providing you spec at least 16 gigs of RAM. I'll come back to that. The M3 also has a significantly improved neural engine, so any on-device machine learning tasks will be faster. So for example, if you're using AI tools in your graphic design package, you might see some improvements over M1 if the software is properly optimized. And all of this helps us to draw a conclusion. If cutting-edge performance is important to your workflow, or if you regularly use applications that push these machines to their maximum capability, then it probably makes sense to buy the M3 model. Because it's at those upper performance limits that you'll really notice the difference between the chips. But, and this is a big but, most users don't push their machines to the max on a consistent basis. And if you are someone who needs top-tier performance, is the iMac the right machine for you? The first iMac that I owned was one of the original G3 iMacs, a blue one with a slot-loading drive on the front. It was great for the time, offering an all-in-one computer with a fun design aesthetic. And within months of the iMac being released, there was a huge market for translucent coloured PC cases. It may look dated now, but at the time it was a design revelation, loved by home users and by businesses that wanted to look modern and creative. And then Apple knocked it out of the park with the G4 iMac, with its unique angle-poised display. Those bright colours made way for a more grown-up look, but the design was still fun. There were 3 different sizes available, but for me this is the one that got away. It's the only iMac I somehow managed to never buy. The G5 iMac led the way for the designs that we see today, but arguably it lost some of that fun element. And it didn't last long either before Apple transitioned into Intel chips, using that same design, but then later the first aluminium models came. And this kind of aluminium design stuck for many generations with minor modifications along the way. It's an elegant design with premium materials, but I always felt it was somewhat lacking the feel of the original iMac. But enter the 24-inch version that we have today with its variety of colours and its colour-matched peripherals. In my opinion, it catches the spirit of the original and has everything that the iMac has come to represent. An all-in-one computer with an aspirational design and high-quality hardware, the most obvious component of which being the display. iMac has introduced some lovely displays over the years, and this 4.5K version is no exception. High resolution, great contrast and vibrant colour, it's a delight to use. Really, the iMac has never been about cutting-edge performance. Now sure, there have been some high-performing models, and those have been much loved by creative professionals, but the majority of iMacs sold had more pedestrian specifications. The thing is, despite that, an iMac always feels greater than the sum of its parts, and so comparisons based purely on tech specs just don't seem to make much sense. And if you've used one, you'll know what I'm talking about. Of course, some would argue that the iMac is too expensive, but I don't agree with this. The M3 iMac with the full 10-core GPU starts at $1,500. Let's compare that to the Mac Mini. Of course, the Mac Mini doesn't have M3 at time of recording, but let's assume it'll stay at the $599 price point when it does get it. So yes, that is a $900 difference to the iMac, and that is a big difference. But the iMac is an all-in-one computer, and the Mac Mini doesn't even come with a keyboard and mouse, so you'll need to budget $149 for a keyboard with Touch ID and $99 for the mouse, and that pushes us up to $847. Of course, the iMac also has some very impressive speakers, and it has a webcam, so we need to add that into our Mac Mini budget, which maybe takes us up to $950, and that leaves us with $549 to get a display. And true, you can get a perfectly decent 4K display for that kind of money, but if you want something with great color accuracy out of the box, you could easily spend all of that $549 difference, and more besides. And what you'll have most likely won't be boasting a beautiful machined aluminium finish. And it also won't be 4.5K. It's easy to think that 4.5K is just a tiny bit bigger than 4K, but that's not the case. The iMac has a resolution of 4480 by 2520, and that represents 11,289,600 pixels. A UHD 4K display has 8.29 million pixels. So that 0.5 actually means you're getting a display with 36% more resolution than UHD 4K. So actually then the iMac is fairly priced, provided that you need a keyboard, mouse, speakers, webcam and display. If you already have those things, then a Mac Mini might work out better. But if you want an iMac, it's because you want the overall package that an iMac delivers. And plenty of folks will no doubt at this point head to the comments section to point out that when your iMac dies, you also lose a perfectly good display. And that is true. But it won't matter if what you want is an iMac. And folks who want an iMac, they want it because they want the overall package, and they probably just don't care as much about specs. And that is sort of the point here. I bought this M1 iMac on eBay a few months ago. It's the M1 model with 16 gigs of RAM and a 512 SSD. I love this yellow colour. I thought it would fit nicely within our new studio aesthetic. Also love the gold coloured keyboard and mouse that it came with. And I even managed to buy a matching trackpad to complete the set. This isn't just a desk ornament for our video set though. Since I've got the iMac, I've been using it for my research and typing up video scripts. I've done some design work, even some photo editing on it, and it's been brilliant. It's an M1. Still, by any measure, a very capable chip for a wide variety of work. So if you're after an M1 iMac, what should you look for? Well, first of all, bear in mind that there are two models. The cheapest model of the iMac has two Thunderbolt ports on the back and fewer color choices. Inside, the chip has one less GPU core. It's still a competent machine, but I'd favour the slightly more expensive model. In addition to the two Thunderbolt ports, you'll get another two USB Type-C ports, and there's Gigabit Ethernet built into the power brick, which is very useful and a very neat design. The M1 model was only available with 8 or 16 gigabytes of unified memory, and most of these iMacs will have 8 gigs. And that is completely fine if you're using your iMac for general day-to-day computing. Office, email, browsing the web, watching YouTube, making video calls. In fact, it will even be fine for light creative tasks as well, photo editing, design, and even basic video editing. But if you plan to push the machine with more of those creative tasks, then 16 gigs is the way to go. I'm talking here about editing larger raw photos, or working with big Adobe Illustrator files that have lots of components, or perhaps video editing with more advanced codecs, effects, and layers. For all of these things, you will notice an improvement if you have 16 gigs of RAM. When it comes to storage, most of these iMacs will have 256 or 512 gig SSDs. But unlike the M3 generation, that 256 entry model will have two NAND chips, so it's still pretty quick. In terms of storage though, 256 is a little bit light. You'd be better off with 512 or more, because that'll give you some future proofing, and you'll enjoy slightly better performance. What if the iMac you want to buy doesn't come with the peripherals you want, or perhaps they're not color matching? It is actually possible to buy them, but it's not as simple as going to the Apple Store. You need to call Apple support and request a replacement part. They'll want the serial number of your iMac, and you might have to speak to a couple of reps before you get to one who knows what to do, but it is possible. I bought this yellow trackpad directly from Apple as a replacement part. It was delivered in under 24 hours, and it actually cost less than the standard options on the Apple Store. Now finally, price is going to be a big factor in whether you choose to buy an M1 iMac at this point in time. You do need to get a decent discount over the new model to make it worthwhile. But certainly when it comes to performance, the M1 iMac has plenty to offer for the vast majority of people who are in the target market for an iMac. Even 2 or 3 years more down the road, this isn't going to be considered a slow computer. It's an iMac. It's greater than the sum of its parts. Thanks for spending some time with me today. I hope you found this video useful, and thanks in advance for your comments, your subs, your shares, your likes, even your dislikes. I'll see you again soon for some more geekery.